It's the Indiana Geeking Podcast with our special guests, Jared and TJ. Yay!
What's the trouble with Tribbles? Small furry creatures purr when you hold them. Calm the central nervous system. No apparent use except being cute. Ravenous eaters, yet they have no teeth. Big fans of Quadrotriticale, a unique and curious species. They are not overbearing, tin-plated, or swaggering. What's the trouble? What's the trouble with Tribbles? Ensign Chekhov made a little joke, very little. What's the trouble? What's the trouble with Tribbles? Mr. Spock claimed they're coming. Her on him has no effect. Born to be pregnant, near 50% of their metabolism geared toward having more and more and more. Take them a clubbing, keep away Klingons. Just don't leave them unattended in your storage or your food processors. They are not garbage scow or Denibian slime devils. What's the trouble? What's the trouble with Tribbles? Mr. Scott made a sad pun we all like to forget. What's the trouble? What's the trouble? What's the trouble with Tribbles? Captain Kirk should relax with the time dropped on his head. No delusions of godhood, but they'll leave you in a good mood. What's the trouble? What's the trouble? What's the trouble with Tribbles? What a day! They just keep eating everything away. What's the trouble? What's the trouble? What's the trouble with Tribbles? What a day! They just keep breeding exponentially. That's the trouble with Tribbles.
Hey there, podcast listeners. This is Tony, the head geek of Indiana Geeking. Before we jump into this week's discussion, I wanted to throw some things out there. To begin, we have a lot of stuff happening the weekend this episode is released. If you're listening to this after that weekend, then just feel free to skip ahead. The timestamps are in the blog post. First, Who North America and Canby will be hosting the All Things Handmade craft show at their site in Canby. Local artisans will be there selling their wares, including many friends of mine. They're the artisans, not the wares being sold. So go check them out from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. Next, if you're in Lafayette, check out LaffyCon this Saturday and Sunday. This is a pop culture convention with costumers, artists, and vendors, as well as a Fiberglass Freaks 66 Batmobile. Also, there is a new podcast in town. Local author James Wilder brings us Tales by the Blue Light, a podcast that brings a new story every episode that'll be sci-fi, fantasy, or horror. He tells me it's a mix between The Twilight Zone and an old-fashioned variety show, and I'm looking forward to its addition to Google Music. In the meantime, if you get your cast from Apple Podcasts or Stitcher, check out the blog post for links to subscribe, and keep an eye on the blog in the coming weeks for more information. Finally, remember that the new Geek Dog and Geek Cat pins are available in the Geeking store on the blog. They are $12 each, and $2 from the sale of each pin goes to Exotic Animal Rescue and Pet Sanctuary to help with their vet bills. Now, let's bring on this episode's returning guest for the podcast's first ever part 1 of a 2-parter. All right, my friends, we are back and we have got some returning guests on here. Every year, since the beginning of the podcast, we have done an episode about Magic the Gathering, which means I have returning guests coming in from those previous episodes. So, gentlemen, go ahead. I'll let you introduce yourselves and let us know what you're into with Magic. We don't need to get a full history, but what your focus and what you're into with Magic is.
Hi, I'm TJ Zmina. Did this last year, and let's see. Since whatever's changed since then, I'm playing a lot of Commander lately. Getting more into some limited draft sealed. Finally kind of found my way in that. Used to not do limited, but definitely found my way in that world. So have not played as much standard, have not played as much constructed. So and have gotten a little bit more into the collection aspect, and we'll kind of talk. we'll come back to that at some point because that world has gotten real wild in the last year or so. But yeah, Jared.
Yeah, no, that's one way to say it. Hey, everybody, this is Jared Juett. I think this is my fourth time on this podcast now, so thank you, Tony, for inviting me back after the third. So I guess we did an okay job. You guys hopefully can listen to those episodes to get a little more background on myself and TJ, and especially our relationship to the game and our relationship with Tony as well. I think that's actually some pretty interesting content. So I'd recommend, before we kind of deep dive into some of this stuff, pause and listen to that if you haven't yet. From a Magic perspective, I primarily buy and sell Magic cards because it's really, really fun. It's a really cool way to make what I like to call kind of Taco Bell money. But in all seriousness,
that stuff will kill you.
Oh, totally. And in all seriousness, in the long run, it can really pay off in some really exciting ways. And I've gotten to meet some really, really cool people out of it. I've gotten, I think, a lot better at the game because of it. I primarily play limited, actually almost exclusively, right? So buying the sealed product and playing with it. And I stream on Twitch, actually. If you look at Twitch TV or twitch.tv/bettermagic, all one word, you can find me. You can find some videos that are up there. I stream a couple times a week. And like I said, it's almost exclusively limited Magic. And we'll talk a little bit more, I think, about some of the software that I use to enjoy the game. I'm sure TJ will want to talk about it too, and Tony a little bit. And that's me.
All right, excellent. And as Jared said, we do have previous episodes talking about how to play Magic, getting started, all of our histories with the game. We're not going to delve into that now. This is like, Avengers Infinity War. Yeah. We've had all the episodes that lead up to this. The gauntlet. But you will be able to find the links to those in the notes attached to this episode. So strongly recommend you listen to those as well. So, in the last year, and it has been almost exactly a year. Yeah. In fact, if it wasn't for a fact, I had one more episode to do between now and when we actually publish this. You guys would be the fourth episode of the year, much like you were the fourth episode of the year last year.
Hey, there's something to be said for consistency, right?
So, but the timing is still going to be fairly similar to where you came out last year.
Great.
Since that time, and we'll delve more into these, the notes that I took based on someone that really doesn't play, that just did some Google searching, we have had 4 expansions since you guys were last on. And correct me if I mispronounce one of these. Made up words are always hard. We had the Hour of Devastation. We had the Ixalan. We had the Rivals of Ixalan, and then Dominaria came out earlier this year, just a few months ago. In addition, we've got the online version, Magic the Gathering Arena, which is still in beta. And then I know you guys mentioned something about a Masters set.
Two
Masters sets. That those I'm not familiar with. But when did those come out, so we can kind of go in chronological order?
Yeah, one was last, I believe November was Iconic Masters, and then this past spring, about a month and change ago, was Masters 25, which was like a 25th anniversary retrospective kind of set.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So we'll go ahead and we'll just go ahead and start from the top. Hours of Devastation came out July of last year, just about a month after you guys were on. And what'd you guys have to say about that? What was the reception on that?
I liked it. I was not doing much constructed at that time. So what I got out of it in a lot of drafts, found a draft mode that worked well, generally some form of Jund, some combination of red, green, black, and was pretty much hitting that consistently and reliably in multiple drafts. A weird card out of that block. When you drafted Hour of Devastation, you drafted a combo of Hour of Devastation and Amonkhet. So you got, was it 2 Hour and 1 Amonkhet was the standard draft, I think? Yeah. So Bitterbow Sharpshooters, which is a kind of a crummy card, but I could pull
the card's fantastic.
2, 3, 4 of those in a draft because everybody was
people didn't know how good they were.
Yeah, and it's just like Bitterbow Sharpshooters, another Bitterbow Sharpshooter, just keep dropping them. It's just like, well, I can't. You've put up an impenetrable wall now. I can't do anything about that.
It gets better than that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that was just one of the odd things where it's like I was always seeing them. It's like, let's take these. So I quite frequently was always in some combination of red, green, black in every one of these drafts, and was always successful with it, which isn't normal for draft. I don't think you can't usually just commit that ahead of time.
Yeah, and you should have.
Yeah. Normally you wouldn't do that, but it was something that I went with and had been so reliably successful with it in the groups I was playing in.
It's really interesting you talk about that, right? Because and we'll get kind of into the overview of Hour of Devastation in 2 seconds because I think it's really interesting. But I think the point that you're really highlighting here is how different the game, we talk about this all the time, right, is how different the game can be for different groups of people. Mm-hmm. And even in the most zoomed in sort of, I guess we'll call it kind of the meta, which is really more of a micro environment that you're playing in, the game can take on a totally different face, a totally different facade than as if you went right down the street, right, and played at a different shop with different people.
Different people,
your experience
different group,
would have been
mindsets.
Would have been totally different than what you're talking about. I think that's what makes the game the best game ever.
And in fact, I think we had talked about that on one of our first episodes where I was talking about this deck that I play down here in Indianapolis that everybody knew and everybody'd play it. I went up at a random convention in Chicago, placed top 8 out of 50 with my pocket pickup game deck because no one played them.
No one was prepared. Yep.
So same deal.
Same thing, interestingly, falls into the finance world, and we'll come back to that too because
totally agree.
As an aside that we'll circle back to here, there's a guy that I do some trading with every year at Gen Con, and he's up in the Detroit area, and he kind of stocks some stores up there, and he will always take cards off my hands at decent value that he's like, yeah, people up in my area love this stuff. It's like cards that are just popular for his group of folks or the groups of the stores and the people in that area will eat up certain cards and certain modes of play that it's like something could sit in my binder for months. Mm-hmm. Nobody will sniff it. And then this guy will be like, yeah, I'll give you something for that. Yeah. And so I always end up trading him a big stack of junk and usually end up getting like, a dual land or a mana drain or something.
And shout out to Michigan Magic, by the way. Those guys are pretty awesome. I know, especially in the financing, it's interesting you talk about that. Some of those Michigan players in particular are some of the smartest Magic players and financiers I've ever met in my life. And it's always like that. They're always like, I'll take anything. I'll buy anything that you got. And it's, and they're
I'll
smart
trade you this
about
for a
it.
potato.
Always. And they're fantastic, man. But I want to zoom out a little bit on Hour of Devastation because I don't remember, and this is my fault. I didn't listen to the last episode to make sure I knew kind of where we left off. And it sounds like Tony did and I didn't.
Well, you're fired.
I know. Yeah. And I'm out of here. But no, so the
and if we have to go back a little farther, no, that's okay.
Yeah, so. I was going to say that's probably what we'll need to do to give a little bit of context. As TJ was saying, it's kind of, it was the second set in a block that was essentially Egyptian themed, as Magic's take on Egyptian mythology and mythos and all that kind of stuff.
Which is new, and that's an interesting thing too.
Oh yeah,
you have return sets, but this is a new thing for them. This is a new space for them.
And every now and then they really try to do this. Okay, well let's break out. We know that people love it when we visit kind of these tropes and the things they're familiar with, so they can bring that familiarity to the game, and they're going to purchase. And they have shareholders that they have to make happy because they're owned by Hasbro. Whatever. It's the whole spider web. But anyway, so the first set in that block was called Amonkhet, right, which was kind of that world, right. And the idea was that the big bad in Magic had actually influenced this world in such a way that he was essentially the god of the world. And then all the Egyptian-themed deities, as we would understand them, essentially bowed to him, right, and made the world in his image. And so all the people there, that's all they ever understood. So our group of Power Rangers essentially land on this world, and they're like, well, we're going to save them from the big bad because we've been finding him across all these worlds. And they find this population, people who have only ever known worship of the big bad. Okay. And so it's a kind of a compelling setting. It got kind of lost in translation, though. I think they'd even say that themselves. So anyway, so Hour of Devastation, the set that we're continuing to talk about here, is essentially when the big bad comes back and says, okay, whatever, Power Rangers screwed it up. I'm just going to kick their butts and reset this whole world kind of as I think it should be, and destroy everybody and spoilers, raise my big old nasty army of guys that I'm going to take to fight on other worlds. So that's kind of the context, right, that we're playing within. And all the 5 colors of Magic kind of have to find where they live within the context of worship of this big, bad, nasty, immortal god, right? So anyways, okay, now I've set that up. What else do you want to talk about from the player's perspective, development, that kind of stuff?
The trivia item here is one of the few sets that contains a card with the name of the set. There's a card, Hour of Devastation, in the set, Hour of Devastation. They did this in Conflux, because there was a card called Conflux in the set Conflux. There's been a couple other cards that have had the name of a set, but they weren't in the set. So that's your trivia item for the day. The Amonkhet by itself, I was not real enthusiastic about. I couldn't really find what I wanted to do with it, and that happens to me sometimes, where it's like the set will come out, and it's like I want to do something with this, and just can't find what I want to do with it. Nothing strikes me about it.
Awesome.
With Amonkhet, that was kind of how I got into it, where it's like, nothing really is striking me about this that I really want to get excited about and build or do with this.
And you're just like the Johnny King, as I know you. I mean, really, in every single way. You're like, let me find a theme, let me find a way to play. I'm going to do this thing.
And it probably does not fit with what was intended or what anybody else is doing. Because if I can't build something that's like odd in some way, like things that I build, nobody's expecting. I mean, my decks might as well just be the Spanish Inquisition. Nobody expects them. The last standard deck I built was red-black, Archfiend of Ifnir, dispense -1/-1 counters with aplomb. Nobody has anything like that, though. It's about a turn slower than it needs to be to actually be competitive, though. Right. So, and that was mostly Amonkhet Hour stuff. So with Hour Devastation, there was enough stuff there, and most of the drafts I was doing were Hour plus Amonkhet. And so that kept me going through that time. Didn't really play much Standard. It wasn't available to me because the store I was going to wasn't able to fire Standard. So
that was kind of a rough period. I'll talk about that.
Yeah, going back to Kaladesh and Aether Revolt, like that stuff, it was kind of different, but that was sort of maybe the precipice whereby then things kind of slowed down after that, and so we kind of started hitting. I think Amonkhet and Hour was starting to be a decline of sorts, or a decline in interest and a decline for play.
I mean, the annual reports actually show that to be the case.
The dollars say so too.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right, and then as we get into the next couple sets, you'll see that continued that theme. So. Yeah. I enjoyed playing it in Limited. I don't think I could have done any more with it in Standard and Constructed and been happy about it. So, it was good to play in Limited. I enjoyed it. But that was what I got out of that. That was what I got out of it.
From a Limited perspective, again, I don't remember how much we talked about Amonkhet, and it was so new anyways that I probably draft 100, 150 times of every set. That's just what I do. That's the only way I engage with Magic as a game, really. All the other we've talked about this before, but all the other formats, I'm like, you know what? I'd rather sell these cards, right? But if I'm opening booster packs, I might as well play with them and try to win. So with Amonkhet, it became very clear. Hopefully, those of you who are listening have had experience to try out Limited in some capacity and understand how to build decks and kind of the different strategies you can take. So when I'm talking about this, isn't too far over your heads, I should say too deep in the weeds, really. But Amonkhet was all about aggression and attacking with creatures and ending the game as quickly as possible. TJ was talking about earlier, hey, I could get in this color, right? And essentially I would have that deck every time. That's not typically the correct strategy, but it worked out for him there, and it worked out for me a lot in Amonkhet because it became very clear that there were a couple colors where it doesn't matter, whatever. You open up the pack and you take an aggressive card in that color and you just stick to it and you do that. And I want my win percentage was something like 65 to 68%, which for limited
is insane.
It's really quite good. And it's just because you figure it out, right? You know it. And to TJ's point that he just made as well, that does not lend itself to a lot of feel good replayability, right? And if that aspect of the game has lost its replayability, then why would anyone buy your sealed product? Your product that's going through a middleman distributor to the local game store, right? If someone's done playing, why are they going to show up to the local game store to buy that sealed product, to play a format that they hate, that isn't fun often, unless they force
worn
this
out?
Exactly, right. That's exactly right. Like in my case, like whatever, I know every time I sit down to do it, I'm going to do the exact thing. My results are going to be pretty good, but that's not interesting, right? There's no reason for me to come back to that over and over again. So it hurt them in a really big way, and it always does when that happens.
And part of why it works better for in my situation maybe than yours, Jared, is that you say you draft 100, 150 times anytime for every set.
Oh, yeah.
I'm in it for like a dozen at most. Like a good cycle for me is like a dozen events. So, I mean, the fact that I did one draft at Gen Con, I did maybe 5, 6 at the local store. So it's like I'm not in it as much. And I found this thing that was consistent, but if I was doing it every week or a couple times a week, it's like, well, I would have worn out on it.
That's exactly right.
So that's why it works for me differently than it would have worked for you in that case.
But think about that. Even with your sample set, you figured out a thing that was like
that worked
really gonna wear out.
I think I did blue-black once because I was able to pick up a lot of flying that way. Flying removal. That was what I was able to get out of it. And that worked okay. And then the next time I ended up in Jund, and that was better, and I liked it and just rolled with it for the next 5 or 6 events that I did.
Yeah. So that was Amonkhet Limited, right? So then the interesting thing was Hour of Devastation came along and actually improved the limited environment like vastly. It was so much more interesting. There were so many more ways to build your deck. There were so many more choices that you would make in any given game. I think TJ even hit on this when he was talking about his deck, the very first kind of parts of his deck. The games would just go pretty long, and you would have a lot of decisions to make to really get kind of that last little percentage point to win. And it was awesome. It was more, I would still play that format now to this day. And they started getting kind of into this bad habit we'll talk about here kind of next, of releasing a set that was like, oh, it's fine. It was whatever. You get worn out. And then a second one with the same theme that actually improved things. And there was actually a design reason behind that, right? They, actually, and TJ, you can help me out here too, but I'll go ahead and jump forward into the reason why that is. They decided a while back, I think in the first episode where we ever got together and to talk, we talked about the idea of the design metamorphosis, right? Where they had gotten away from having 3 sets in a block. So deciding they were going to return to a world, to a certain story arc, and have kind of a beginning, a middle, and an end in sets that typically were, a whole bunch of cards in the first one, and then about half that many cards in the second and the third sets that they would release.
So you'd end up with about 500 to 600 cards, but it was fully half was in the first set. So and that set was always out a little bit longer than the span between set 1 and 2 in the block was always a little bit longer than the span between 2 and 3.
Yep.
So,
and from a design perspective, that really hampered their ability to show off all the really cool new stuff that they wanted. And then for balancing purposes, they knew they had to hold stuff back to put into things that were coming up later. It was just a total mess. So they said, okay, well, we'll go to 2 sets every block, and that at least lets us cut it down the middle. But then we ran into issues just like I described, where the first set, they were like, oh, it's okay, this is going to be what it's going to be, and we're going to save the really juicy stuff most of the time for the second set, which, again, was the case in Hour of Devastation, and the limited format in particular was quite good, was actually really fun. You could do all sorts of, TJ was talking about casting a bunch of 4/4s for 4 with Vigilance and Reach, I think, and they're good, like, they're really good, and when you get games where you have to play around things like that, it's fantastic, right? And one of the best cards in that format was like a 7/7 for 7. So you've already played the game at least 7 or 8 turns, and you play it, and it resets your life total, and you just bash again. You play basically another sub game. And that's good and fun and interactive Magic, right? The longer you get to play any game and have all of your decisions matter, the better the game is, period, right? That's just how it is. So it's funny though, and TJ, if you want to pick up from me here, they are now moving to
I would call this unstructured is what I would call it.
Yeah, sure.
Because just within the last couple days, they've announced sets going forward into actually, I think even into 2019,
yes.
because they just announced the fall set for this year will be Guilds of Ravnica. So we're going back to Ravnica for the 3rd time.
Yep.
And then the spring set will be Ravnica again. So they've just announced that.
Well, it'll be 3. It'll be 3.
It's going to be 3,
yeah.
right? They've announced 2, and they said there's going to be a 3rd, but we don't quite know what we're doing with it. Or we're not. They probably know what they're doing with it. They're not telling
they don't
yet
disclose,
on the 3rd one.
yeah.
Yeah, but they split it down the middle this time. First Ravnica block was weird because it was 3 sets, and they did 10 guilds, and it's 4, 3, and 3 across the 3 sets. Then the second time when they did Ravnica, it was 5 and 5, and then the 3rd set was kind of this Wild West of nonsense that I hated.
Yeah.
And so this time they're going to do 5, 5, and then who knows what they're going to do with the last set.
Right.
But it's not structured like it was in the past, where the 3 sets per year that were all in the same theme. Well, now we have Dominaria just came out. It's its own set. It's standalone. There's not going to be another follow-up set.
It's
with
so
it
good, and we'll
immediately.
get to it. Oh my god, I really hope this becomes this. Really, we do have enough content for 2 episodes, because getting everyone to wait and to hope and to think about the things we're going to say about Dominaria just it tugs at my heartstrings. It's so good.
So Dominaria is not a block. It's its own set. Then we go back to Ravnica in the fall. So that's
But it'll be
different.
but importantly, right? It'll actually just be almost 3 blocks, because that's how they're doing it now, right? So each set is essentially its own block
Can be its
in
own
the
block.
traditional sense, right?
Can be one set standalone in the middle of everything.
Yeah,
or
yeah.
we just got out of the Ixalan 2-set block. So it's a 2-set block of Ixalan, then Dominaria kind of by itself,
Yeah.
a core set, which we get back, thank goodness. And then we're going to do 3 Ravnica sets after that. So it's kind of unstructured now. They're kind of seeing what they can do, because the block structure, the 3-set block year structure, was pretty much, we do this because we've always done it. And somebody finally said, stop. Why are we still doing this 15, 20 years in? It's probably about 15 years worth of 3-set blocks. And it's like, oh, why are we still doing this? Well, we've always done it. Well, that's a crummy reason. Let's not do that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And but so importantly, though, I want to make sure the listeners know that is the difference, right? Is that in the 3 or even the 2-set paradigm, as we were saying before, some of those are smaller, right? Some of those are 149 cards or something.
Yeah,
whereas
so it was always
each of these is going to be almost 300.
They're
each.
pretty much promising large sets from here on out.
Forever,
so
yeah.
220 to 250 cards.
And they have a lot more
sets.
freedom when they do that.
Yeah, they're trying to be as flexible as possible, I think.
And the last thing that's important about that is that they will no longer, kind of bring this full circle, is they will no longer be drafted together.
Right, drafts are now single set operations. It's
Right.
not going to be like the Amonkhet Hour Devastation combo drafts. So you got one
Yes.
Amonkhet 2 hour, for example.
Right. Ixalan's really exciting too, so we're going to jump into it. But from a financial perspective, a really quick overview of Amonkhet and Hour of Devastation. There wasn't anything really too exciting, other than the Masterpiece series. We can spend a little bit second talking about that too, because you guys, were how do I explain this and be really nice about it? So when you guys were collecting Magic cards originally,
Back in
I
our
was
day.
not old enough. I was collecting Magic cards as well, but I was not old enough to have them kind of imprint those same experiences on me. I'll say it that way. And so what they were able to do with some of these Masterpiece series is provide these premium cards that were found in extremely low quantities across the sealed products. Starting with Battle for Zendikar. We talked about that, where they had a bunch of lands and stuff because that's the theme of the world, whatever. And they had a bunch of really kind of, well, I'll call these some cards from antiquity, right? And they were recreated in really cool format. And they were like, well, maybe we'll do this going forward because it sells booster packs. We have shareholders, Hasbro to make happy, etc. So they do it with the artifact world. They kind of have a theme of artifacts. Those are pretty cool. They were quite good. And then with when Amonkhet and our Devastation come around, this will hopefully be the last one we talk about, but it's really important because they were like, well, we're kind of out of ideas for why to bring back.
They just kind of picked a bunch of stuff.
They just picked a bunch of spells because they were kind of cool, and some enchantments, and they picked
There's a little bit of everything, instant sorcery,
creatures, and
creatures.
it was nuts.
You name it, we got it here.
They got it, and it was
here
it was
Crazy
cool.
Bolus's Enchantment Emporium.
That's exactly right. And they found some really cool ones. They really did. And then they were like, let's also make some premium versions of new cards that we're coming out with. So again, those kind of Egyptian, the Pantheon. Those were also created in kind of that premium format.
Each of the masterpiece groups, actually, they did that with, because remember, there were the 5 new lands out of Battle for Zendikar, and then they did it with the was it Titans? No, not Titans. Gear Hulks. The Gear Hulks out of Kaladesh.
Yes.
So those were new cards in Kaladesh, but they also existed in the masterpiece form. And then in Hour of Devastation and Amonkhet, it was the gods, wasn't it? The 5 gods exist in the masterpiece format as well as the regular.
And so those, again, are all premium versions. They're in such low quantity that demand still kind of outpaces supply, which is really cool from a financial perspective. The people who got in on those early were trading, standard cards that were only legal to play for a certain amount of time. They're still legal now, but will only be legal for a certain amount of time. Trading those into those did really well. Because again, that demand started outpacing supply for some of the really good ones.
Yeah, those prices have stayed
up. Totally. And you see some of them growing even. Yeah, some of them appreciating. So if you are interested in building your 60 card fun kitchen table deck, which is, I would assume, what the vast majority of listeners to this podcast, that's how they have experienced Magic. I would say if you want to make your game affordable, put the investment forward in some of those really cool pieces and sit on them, play with them, really love them, have some fun. And then when it's time for you to move on to other things you want to do in gaming or get your kids into Magic, you'll be able to cash out of those like no problem, like so easy.
It's something in the current format that is going to hold some value, and you can kind of take it to the bank, because so much with standard has been just like, you don't know what's going to hold value over time, whereas this is sort of a close to a guarantee of a thing as you can probably come up with.
Absolutely.
That these masterpiece cards are going to hold value and ignore rotations and everything as far as that's concerned.
And importantly, as we move on, TJ will kick off Ixalan for us, I think is the next thing on the list. Importantly, masterpieces kind of met their end in Hour of Devastation. So that's really important. They've said they will bring them back when it makes sense to bring them back, which really in my mind says
words for we don't know what we're
going to do. If for whatever reason we have a bum set that we think the only way we're going to sell it is cool stuff, they'll probably put it in. They're not stupid. Like they know how to make money. That's their job. But I would say it's not going to be for a while. So
yeah, we almost got them in Ixalan though, because that's what the two-sided card, the two-sided flip to lands. That frame on the back is what would have been the masterpiece frame if they had done it.
Yeah, man.
So
yeah.
So, well, that does bring us over to what the next expansion was, which was Ixalan. That came out in notes. That came out September of 2017.
Dinosaurs, pirates, merfolk, vampires, excitement. Not really.
And something I didn't point out on Devastation, that was the 76th expansion set.
Holy crap, is that right?
Yeah.
20 some odd years. Yeah, I guess that's right.
25 years, 3 sets a year.
Yeah, I guess that's right. Sure.
So, but there we go. Go ahead, TJ. Sorry to interrupt, bud. I'll go ahead and let's dive into Ixalan.
Yeah, Ixalan, very tribal, or they tried to force tribal. They give you 4 tribes, and if you don't like those, well, too bad, because you got 4 tribes. You're out of luck. Yeah. I tried to force tribal in a draft once, and it blew up in my face. I made the decision going in that I was going to take whatever the rare was in pack 1, and that was going to be the tribe I built around. Well, the rare was a land, and it was a land that did not even fit the colors of any of the tribes. It was the blue-white land. So I'm like, all right then. So now what are we doing?
Hey, if it's worth the price of a pack,
you might as well take it.
You get it back. Yeah.
Yeah. It was. There was an unclaimed territory in there too, which I think might have been what I took.
That's worth more than the price of a pack.
Probably. Yeah. So I did not care for the Ixalan block, and it was because I felt like they forced this tribal thing really hard and didn't give you enough options for it. Now, granted, if you're going to go tribal, you can only really fit so many tribes in a set. Otherwise, you're going to spread yourself too thin. There's not going to be enough to support it. But they forced it real hard, and it really didn't work well for me. Was not a huge fan, and I found some of the drafts that I did, I was finding that I would be halfway through pack 2 before I had committed to anything. Yeah, I did a draft where I didn't end up committing to Merfolk until halfway through pack 2. And then when I finally did, the only thing that stood in my way of winning the event was a Carnage Tyrant, and you're pretty much going to lose to a Carnage Tyrant. So, it was just really weird. I ended up with this blue-green thing. I was like, blue-green Merfolk, search for his Kenta, sure, why not? So, a couple of enchantments that boosted stuff. It was like, all right, well, we'll try this and see what happens. And it worked out fine, but it was just a weird thing that I was not expecting to. I was expecting to have some sort of commitment by the end of pack 1, and when I'm not getting a real strong commitment to anything until halfway through the draft, it's kind of weird.
Well, if I could interject here for just a second,
sure.
just to make sure I picked up on like the last 10 minutes or so correctly, Ixalan was one of the first one where they went from 3 to 2.
Amonkhet was.
Amonkhet was?
No. Kaladesh was.
Kaladesh.
Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Was. Yeah.
So by this point, the 2 instead of 3
was committed to.
This was our third strike, actually.
And it was they had a weird bumpy transition to go from 3s to 2s because of the way that standard rotations were, because they had to jam Origins in with not Fate Reforged, Dragons of Tarkir. So
and they just kind of decided that was going to be the line where things kind of fall off the bench.
They designed the Khans of Tarkir block as a 3, but they made the commitment to the 2-set block idea, so they had to kind of fake it out and say, okay, so there's really 3 sets in the block, but we're going to split it down the middle and make Origins, which was supposed to be the last core set concept, as part of Dragons of Tarkir. So they kind of jammed it all weird, and then
they did what they had to do. Well, because they work, and we've talked about this before, but they work 2 years in the future, basically, for us 2 years in the past, when we're looking at what we know.
They're already looking at building 2020, 2021 stuff now.
Totally, yeah. So I'll give a little bit of background on Ixalan. So we've gone from quite literally this extreme devastation on the Egyptian mythos world. This is another new what's called a top-down design world, where we've got this concept that comes from, we want to follow these themes and these cultural tropes, and then essentially build the cards to match them. And in this world, we're in the world of kind of Mesoamerican exploration and conquistador expansion and all that fun stuff.
With dinosaurs.
With some dinosaurs. So it's, as TJ said, kind of all these tribes vying for this sort of passage into what we would understand culturally as kind of this land of El Dorado, right? So the vampire conquistadors come from who knows where, and of course there's pirates constantly roaming the seas, and they're from who knows where. Some of them from the mainland, from them from anywhere else. Yar, and then of course the natives, quote unquote, who get along really, really well with the dinosaurs. They kind of have this symbiotic relationship, and then the merfolk who kind of keep watch of the earth and waters itself. All again vying for their chance to take over this gilded world.
One of the things about this is you got a weird color balance. A lot of times, most of the time, if they will span things across colors. There will either be something, for example, in the Amonkhet Hour of Devastation, there was one god in each color. So that was sort of like we spread that out evenly.
And that's a good way to anchor it, yeah.
Yeah, and then like in a Ravnica block, there's the 10 guilds, each of which is 2 colors. So they spread that pretty evenly, or they try as best they can. In this, they did not span it with colors evenly, because pirates are blue, red, black. Yep. Dinosaurs are white, red, green. The pirates were white and black, and then the merfolk were blue and green. So you didn't have a color balance there. They kind of gave you they kind of threw some things in a hat, and it's a little odd. Pirates in white seems sort of odd, but then the more you think about it, the more yes, vampires. Sorry. Yeah. So you had it was a little odd in that it wasn't quite balanced in a way that you'd expect. So that made it even harder to try to do mix and matching, which again, that comes back to in my style of play is that I will build things that are not quite like anything else. So like when I played, when I was doing Return to Ravnica, I did a black-green deck, but it wasn't really Golgari themed. It was a little bit graveyard, a little dredgy, but not totally. It was not quite like what black and green meant for Ravnica. You didn't quite have the opportunity to do that in Ixalan, I don't think. You kind of you were sort of forced into, if you're going to do a tribe, you better just do the tribe and forget doing anything else. So I felt like they were trying to force my hand, and I didn't care for it, and I never built a standard deck for Ixalan or Rivals.
Yeah, and Limited fell prey to a lot of the exact things you're talking about,
and
right?
who was at your table? If the person behind you was trying to take the same stuff you were pretty much hosed.
No, you were screwed, totally, 100%. Because
you had to guess at what was, you had to examine what was going by and then start taking that stuff because you knew the other people weren't.
But if you're doing that, then you're too late, right? So you're totally screwed coming and going.
No, but I had these drafts where it's like I was in this well into the second pack before I committed to anything. So maybe you weren't totally screwed, but
if everyone else is in, then what are you doing, right?
Yeah, the likelihood you were screwed was very high. So I may have just lucked out in that situation. But
you're absolutely right. So if the designers themselves are trying so hard to make this kind of tribal story and tribal theme come to life, but they are limited by the weird math they have to do to make kind of the colors work and the ability to actually cast your spells.
Really, at the end of the day, it does come down to colors because that is the crux of Magic. It's like the colors will be there no matter what they design. The colors are still the colors.
Exactly.
So that doesn't change, and no matter how you slice that up, it does not change the fact that the colors are still the colors, and you still have to deal with that as a designer.
So at the end of all things, what they had to do is in the limited environment. I'm getting a little in the weeds here, but what they had to do that follows exactly to what TJ is saying is in something like the dinosaur tribe, for instance, right, which was spread out across 3 colors. If you were to draft a deck that kind of had that theme to it, it wasn't so much about the dinosaurs, right? But then to empower something that had less reach by only having 2 colors, let's say, like vampires. Actually, Merfolk is a better example, right? It's blue and green. They were like, well, what the heck are we going to do with these guys who miss out on the reach of a 3rd color? Oh, well, let's make all of their cards care much more about their tribe than these other tribes that we're building. And having that weird balance was like, what the heck is going on? It was really confusing. And at the end of the day, everyone realized that if you just built a good aggressive deck that just like turned sideways and attacked your opponent, it didn't matter anyways. And that's not good, right? When you're designing your game to be enjoyed in a way to kind of tell the story of these tribes vying for power, and who cares? You just draft some colors and you just attack and you turn your dude sideways.
Draft good stuff.
Yeah,
you're just drafting like pick 2 colors and take the best card.
And the games end again by turn 4, 5, or 6 or something like that. That's just lame. Like, who cares? Who's going to come back to that? It's not compelling in any way. And they hamstrung themselves because they couldn't really figure out the math to get it right. A. And B, they didn't know how to really capitalize on that tribal stuff. Except, again, like TJ talked about, Merfolk was pretty good. It was good.
And the vampire stuff. In my Merfolk deck. I was just thinking. Well, about that. It's like
that's exactly right.
Hey, you got your dinosaur at my Merfolk. No, you got your.
That's so right. And so in a theme that they've done successfully before, I will argue, they've done like Onslaught, which was fantastic. I thought, especially when it moved to like Legions, which was all creature based. Mm-hmm. Man, did they do it right? Did they kill it? Like, it was great. It was really fun and had some good mechanics.
I will interject this, though. Yeah. At that time, they were still... This was before 8th edition. Onslaught was before 8th edition, and 8th edition was the great creature type consolidation of 2000.
It was like the same. They decided all at once. Yeah.
They finally boiled the creature types down, and so previous to that, you had a few creature types that you did see across things because in original Magic, creature types weren't meant to be that important.
Correct.
But you still had like elves and goblins and merfolk to a slightly lesser extent. You had your garden variety creature types that appear in every fantasy game and
D&D in particular. Right?
Yeah. I mean, you expect these things, but. With the great creature type consolidation of 8th edition, that started finally really mattering. But these are not creature types. The types in in Ixalan, dinosaurs and pirates didn't really exist until that point.
Yeah.
I mean, you had Erg Raiders and you have Fungosaur, I guess, but Fungosaur was a lizard and Erg Raiders was...
It's a beast now, yeah.
Is it a beast now?
Actually, you're right, though. It's a lizard beast. It's a lizard beast.
Oh, gosh. Okay. Well, they branched into this weird space. Well, here's some new creature types. It's like, okay, what are we doing here?
And how symbiotic does that become, right? If you can only play with the things that you release in that set. So it just didn't work, man. If you're going to do tribal, you have to go all in. You have to be like a lore. We talked about Onside, but you have to be like a Lorwyn too, which is kind of that, that Grimm's fairy tale world. But it works, right? Because you've got all these goblins that are messing around and they're mischievous. And you have all these tree folk that are kind of living their lives, and then the fairies that are also mischievous.
Lorwyn
all that
color
stuff,
balance was not perfect either across the tribes, but it at least you didn't feel as forced into it.
That's exactly
somehow with Ixalan, they managed to make it so you felt forced into it. I'm like, how on earth?
Everything. I listen to a lot of strategy. Right, podcasts I listen to like nonstop. That's all I do is I listen to that stuff and then I play and then I jam like 100, 150 drafts, right? And the best thing I heard about Ixalan was you are on rails. You pick that first couple of cards and you're on rails. And we keep coming. I know I keep coming back to it, but why would anyone buy into that experience?
It never worked in video games. People really don't like it in video games. Why do they want it on a customizable card game?
That's exactly right. And so I don't know. Ixalan was a big miss for me.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with you on that.
Well, then after Ixalan came Rivals of Ixalan.
And that sucked just as much.
But before we move on to that, we need to wrap up 2017. Sure. And that's when you mentioned that iconic, and I just wrote down iconic. What was the full title? The Iconic Masters. That you said there was strong opinions about. And since we're starting to hit about the 40-minute mark on the podcast, we're going to go ahead. We'll wrap up this episode with the ending of 2017. We'll talk about Iconic Masters, and then we're going to take a break. And we're going to get a drink, go to the bathroom, all that stuff. You guys are going to have about a week break, and then we'll come back next week looking at 2018.
We're going to need a drink to talk about Iconic Masters. Holy cow.
Yeah, you better believe it.
So, but you said, in the fall of 2017, late fall, that's when Iconic Masters came out. It was not, when I was looking at stuff, listed as one of the expansions. So what was Iconic Masters, and what's up with the strong opinions? What are these?
So this is a Masters set, which was something that originated several years ago with what was called Modern Masters. It's not a set that falls into the standard blocks. So it's not a set that's released and becomes part of the standard format. They had been doing these about once a year up to this point, so Iconic Masters was actually out of cycle because they had been doing them in the spring or early summer in the past. So this was an extra one they jammed in there.
Jam's a good word for it.
Jam is a good word for it because it felt kind of forced. It felt like the kind of thing where it's like, this was a product we didn't exactly need. I think it's maybe a little better than people have given it credit for, but for... One of the issues I've had extensive discussions with the owner of Heroes Emporium about this, and Iconic Masters did not offer the value that previous Masters sets generally had, and people had come to expect that a Master set, and granted with a Master set the packs are much more expensive. It's a $10 booster pack instead of a $4 booster pack. You're guaranteed a foil in every pack. But also the overall value of the set has tended to be higher. In past Modern Master sets, we've had Tarmogoyf, which goes about $100 or so. We've had there tends to be more high dollar cards in them because it justifies the cost. What happened is Iconic Masters did not have that value. The best card in Iconic Masters from a value point of view was Mana Drain. And actually, much to my surprise, the Iconic Masters Mana Drain is really cheap as mana drains go. It's pretty affordable. If you want a mana drain, $60 gets you a mana drain. That was the best card in the set, and then it really dropped off from there. And there was a lot of grumbling about people had started to expect that master sets were a license to print money for Wizards, and if you bought a master set, really, previous master sets, like if you bought a box, you definitely got your money out of it. It was almost guaranteed.
Put it in your closet. Yeah. And wait a couple of years, and now the first time their first experiment, right? So the first Modern Master box, some of those are upwards of $600 a piece.
Those things disappeared. Oh, I'm seeing hand gestures out of the corner of my eye. I'm like, what's he telling him? Two. Sell.
It was just one finger. Don't worry.
Hey, yeah.
Each hand. The previous Master sets, I remember the first Modern Masters, if you didn't pre-order it, you couldn't get it.
There was no way to get it.
It disappeared. It evaporated. Second Modern Masters was similar. It just, you couldn't get it after the fact. You didn't pre-order it.
Putting them away like gold bars, man.
Yeah, you could not get it unless you pre-ordered it. Eternal Masters was a little bit less that way, I think. That was still available for a while. You could get it. Iconic Masters, I believe they raised the print run. And also, it had good stuff in it. It had a lot of playable cards in it. Whether it just didn't have the value. And I think that was where people lost it. It was like, this is not that bad. It's just not printing money. I mean, if I go and drop $200 on a box of Iconic Masters, it's probably
you might get $115 out of it. You might get $70.
If you didn't hit a mana drain, you weren't making your money back. And even if you did hit a mana drain, it was dicey. So it just didn't have the value and fun to draft. You know, it was very playable. It was a cool format in that regard. Yeah, it was very playable. There were things in it that deserved a reprint. You know, I've pulled a handful of cards out of Iconic Masters for a deck I just built for Commander. I've got 5 or 6 IMA cards in there, so it's not terrible. It's not as terrible as far as a designed thing as people want to say it is. It's terrible from a value point of view, and the case in point there is that. I've heard of store owners just having to crack the packs and sell the singles because nobody's buying the packs, nobody's buying the product.
Nobody's buying the boxes, yeah.
Yeah, so or they're selling it at almost cost. So I mean, that's, you know, if you want Iconic Masters, you can get it, and you can get it at a decent price because they weren't selling, and it was kind of a forced product where you felt like there was a lot of stuff that got released in very short order between Ixalan, then Iconic Masters, and Rivals of Ixalan. Yep. We had 3 releases in 4 months, and that's just too much.
And that was going to be the norm, right? So I would say Iconic Masters fell victim to being that last pushing the envelope experiment for Wizards.
And they had to say, whoops.
Yeah, they did in a big way, and they bid it. They bid it really well. I mean, I guess it's not even true, right? They print it and they sell it to the distributors, and the distributors ate it all.
The distributors had to,
because I'm sure they sold
the store owners.
The store owners even worse because they're the third in the trickle down line.
You know what this reminds me of? It just occurred to me. The distribution around 94 back in like. If a store wanted 10 boxes of the Dark, they had to order 50 and then they might get 10. If they wanted 10 boxes of Legends, they had to order 50 or so. Well, so that happened with those first early expansions. Then you got to Fallen Empires, and the stores were like, we want 20 boxes of Fallen Empires, we better order 100. And then 100 boxes of Fallen Empires showed up at the door. They're like,
So that's exactly right, because Iconic Masters is where essentially Wizards' printing philosophy had become at that point. It happened about maybe 3 or 4 years before this, but the culmination of a luxury product, right, that is now being much closer to printed to demand for something like a luxury product is really a dangerous prospect. So there's all sorts of things that were wrong. I mean,
you kind of have to inject a little bit of scarcity into it.
You must, if you really want to make money, you want to help the people who are your distributors and people who are selling your product, are willing to buy your product from you to sell it to other people. You have to follow that demand curve and be on the good end of it.
Says Mr. Economist over here.
No, it's true. And so there's no it was just really rough because we were all experiencing wallet fatigue at that time. TJ touched on that. I mean, it was 4 or 5 things in a row. It was month by month there was a new thing to buy from Wizards. And Wizards' philosophy, and you can read, this is all documented. This isn't us speculating or anything. We look at this stuff all the time, right? This is why we're bringing this information to you, so you can make better purchasing decisions. As geeks, hopefully that's the one thing we can bring to you. They knew it. They know, okay, well, if we print one thing that's for one demographic within geekdom, and then we print another thing that's that another demographic will latch on within geekdom, then maybe they won't suffer from the kind of wallet fatigue because they'll pick and choose what they want to do. But that's just not true with Magic players at all. I think Magic players will buy anything and everything all the time.
Yeah.
And Wizards,
like, this is new. I should buy that.
Exactly. And Wizards is so tone deaf to their own success, right? That they back themselves into these kind of corners. So TJ's totally right. So Iconic Masters comes out.
and it's like the fourth thing that you want to buy out of a line of like 6 things. And it's
time of year also is around Christmas.
That's exactly right. And it's 3 times as expensive as anything else you want to buy to enjoy the product. And everyone's like, why that? Okay, this better be good, right? And then all the spoilers come out, which they do a pretty good job of. They want to build hype. It's pretty good marketing. I'm a marketer by profession, and I will tell you they do a pretty decent job. And so all these spoilers come out, and people are like, well, that's not that great. That's not really what I wanted. And the entire population is confused because they call it iconic masters. And in their minds, they say, well, iconic, that must mean cards that are really rare, that are really iconic to the game. And in Wizards' minds, they say, oh no, people are going to get the fact that we called it iconic masters because it includes iconic cards, which we mean to be the creature types that are iconic to each color, aka demons, dragons, angels, sphinxes, and hydras, I believe.
Yeah, they biffed the marketing on that.
It would say, like, who would no one like I know this because I care about this kind of stuff and I'm way too into it. Like, but the vast majority,
someone like me looking at it,
yeah, and exactly right. And someone you're totally right. Someone from like Tony's background with the game in particular would look at it and be like, oh, well, iconic. Well, something that's iconic to me would be like a demonic tutor, maybe, right? We were talking about that before, and then that doesn't show up, and it's a bunch of like dragons that are worth like a buck.
Mana Drain.
Yeah, and Mana
Which
Drain.
scared the heck out of me.
Mana Drain's pretty iconic. I'll give you that.
I own 1 Mana Drain. I own a Legends Mana Drain, and when I saw that reprint, I'm like, is this going to tank my old Mana Drain?
Yeah. Well, people, I know, because people were so. That's a really funny story too, right? Because people were so upset about it. They're like, we're not going to budge on the price that we sell our original OG Mana Drains.
Yeah.
Because why would we? Because Wizards is screwing us over. There's no way we're going to do that, and this reserves us all this stuff.
It sat on that same price I bought it at. I'm like, okay.
Oh, it's awesome, which is good. That's the players voting with their wallets on this kind of stuff, and why it hurt Wizards so bad. Their marketing campaign around it was really rough. Was really terrible. They did a great job with the spoilers. They always do, like I said. But they released it at HasCon, which is Hasbro's toy convention.
Is that a new event? Is that something recent, or is that
2 years old now? I want to say.
New
It's pretty new. And they were like, "This is going to be great. We're going to do this, and Magic's going to be a huge part of HasCon and blah blah blah." And they release it, and everyone's like, "Well, only 0.000000001% of the Magic population was there or even heard about HasCon or cared about it." They're like, what? But this is our big marketing push. And it just didn't do anything. And so sales were in no way bolstered by this event that they thought was going to be this huge hullabaloo.
Yeah.
So
it was
anyways.
a cool idea, honestly.
Oh, it was awesome. Yeah, it was really cool.
It was neat to see the cards about a month or two
and getting drafted and stuff.
Yeah, you could actually see this whole thing working a couple months in advance of actually being able to buy it, which like that should have been a huge hype engine, and it didn't pan out that way.
They just didn't think it through very well at all.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate because and TJ said it too, I agree with him 100%, is the set is not as maligned as people want to make it. I don't think so.
It's not as bad as people want to say the set is bad, and it's like your cards are bad and you should feel bad. Well, no, that's not the case.
Not at all.
The cards are not that bad.
No, the format's fun to play. Like
There's
it was
not a ton of value. So if you're looking at it from a value point of view or an investment point of view, yeah, it's kind of a dud.
It's rough. And to just so everyone's clear, the MSRP typically on these, we'll call them, I forget exactly what Wizards calls them, but kind of these deluxe products, right? Or the premium products. There we go. Is like $250 a box, roughly.
Yeah.
And you can get one on eBay for like $140 now.
Yeah.
That's much closer. That's still with probably a premium over what you would ever hope to get out of it.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, MSRP on the box would be $240 at $10 a pack. So it's,
there we go. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're smaller boxes too. They're 24 packs instead of 36.
Yeah. So it's just they're whatever. It was a total dud. So there you go.
That is iconic masters.
But hey, if you can get it under $140 and you want to play it and draft with your friends and have everybody pitch in, it's really fun. It is fun. I thought it was great. I played it a handful of times and I've learned a lot about Limited. Always do. It's really fun. Go for it for sure, but don't buy it at $200.
Don't buy it at retail, but
No
I mean, you can get the stuff. Yeah, and 140, 150, something like that. That's that's
reasonable.
What does that come to a pack? About 650, 7?
Yeah, and that's less than you'll get them off the shelf.
Yeah, so I mean, go for it. But
and eBay's got a ton. So.
Yeah, wonder where they got those from.
You want to jump into Rivals really quick?
Do we have much to? I think we probably, honestly, Rivals probably fits. I don't think they did so much with that outside of what they had done with Ixalan. I mean,
Yeah.
we can talk about Rivals in 2 minutes because I don't think it was so
okay.
vastly different.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I mean, and there wasn't anything that was that exciting or different. At least with Hour of Devastation, we could talk about masterpieces, which are things that would stay. I mean, your typical standard stuff that affects the meta game,
your Planeswalkers, your slight oddity card or whatever. You know,
but even then, that's pretty much it. Yeah. There just wasn't too much. But I will say, from a limited perspective, it was awesome. Actually, Rivals was a good format. I would play it a lot, but it was annoying to know that for the second or third time in a row, they had come out with a second set where they had saved stuff that they didn't put in the first set to make the limited environment better. And it's like, what the heck? Why do we have to then wait through a set that sucks to get one that I actually want to play?
And
right?
We will refer to this as rock bottom.
Totally. They were the total bottom of the barrel, man. And prices were, total overall sales, engagement, adoption. I mean, rough. We're talking, it was almost a crashing moment.
And store owner point of view, the thing about this is that when Heroes Emporium reopened, and I spent quite a bit of time there, was during Kaladesh. And so he has weathered declining set after declining set. So it's not been great. And that's not
a unique story. Even these people who have been around for like 20 years, they're like, oh my God, Kaladesh, the end of it. Amonkhet, the end of it.
I've been hearing that established stores have been losing F&M crowd like crazy.
And F&M, Friday Night Magic, you expect... it doesn't matter where you are in the nation, you're going to get a handful of nerds like us who don't want to do anything else on a Friday night, go place cardboard and hang out with each other and play. And the gameplay itself of something like the constructed format in particular, right, is so stagnant and so lame, and nothing new or exciting has been introduced. People are like, I got better things to do. When nerds say they have better things to do than play Magic the Gathering, like, you are in trouble, man.
Yeah, I got to go wax my couch.
You are in trouble.
It's a bad day.
So, and it affected, from a financial perspective, it affected a lot of these small stores trying to get in. I mean, and the general thing is don't ever try to open a store anyways. But the people who have them and had to sustain... Man, 6 months. I mean, that's important.
Yeah.
6 months of overhead and
at a critical time when you're trying to open or trying to spawn a community there. You're trying to spin up a community.
Heck yeah, man.
That's no way to do it. I mean,
the joke in the store, it's not even a joke, it's the truth. But the joke in the store community is that the vast majority of stores who have been around for the last 20 years can sell whatever board games they want, can bring in whatever communities they want. They get in their D&D people. They make money on it. They make money on snacks and Magic events, and that's it.
And when you reduce that to snacks,
you are screwed, man. You are, and I love all of you guys listening out there. I really do. But man, what a rough place for Wizards to put those people in. To put those people who are the lifeblood of your product, of your game, to put them in that position was like, and they knew it. They're not stupid. They knew what they were doing. But it's like, whatever, man. I mean, we'll talk about the rest in the next episode.
On the one hand, not every set can be a bomb, but not every set can bomb either.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
It's the two sides of that coin. It's going to be cyclical, and I think in the next episode here, we're going to get to how we see things maybe turning the other way.
Oh, it's great. Yeah.
So.
All right, excellent. Well, we will see you guys next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. And gentlemen, we'll continue this conversation in about 5 minutes.
See you then.
I'd like to thank everybody for listening to the Indiana Geeking Podcast. You can find the blog post for this episode, as well as information like Hoosier convention listings, past podcast episodes, local geek shop reviews, and more at indianageeking.com. If you like what I'm doing, there are ways you can help. First, you can make sure you subscribe through Apple Podcasts, Google Music, Stitcher, or whatever your preferred podcatcher is. Also, if your method allows it, I'd love it if you leave me a rating and review. Good or bad, it lets me know how I'm doing. Also, if you are so inclined, you can visit the Support Geeking in Indiana page on the blog, where you can find links to the Geeking store, affiliate sites, and places where you can donate to help with the blog's expenses. The music this week is provided by two great local bands. The opening song was The Trouble with Tribbles Part 1 off of the Trouble with Tribbles EP by 5 Year Mission, and the closing music I'm currently talking over is Keep Beach City Weird by the Shakeups from the Shakeups in Beach City. You can find all of their info in the show notes. Remember, my friends, support local. Last but certainly not least, I want to give a huge thanks to my patrons for supporting the blog and podcast. One of their few perks is a shout out on the cast, and I'm more than happy to give love to Becca, Caitlin, Claire, Gabe, Ginger, Kayla, Mal, Michael, Rachel, Spencer, Taylor, and Tommy for their support. Thank you all for listening. I'll see you next time, and always remember, live long and prosper, may the force be with you, and as always, be excellent to each other.